So we mustn't lose track of time because I'm like,
Oh, yeah. All right. So today's February 28th, 2021, and we're going to continue our discussion on the Desiderata Extinctionati. Our agenda today, we're going to review the practical exercises. So if you have any thoughts or anyone who um, experienced it or tried it out. In addition to that, Gary proposed to pause for breath at the first hour. After the first hour, begin to draw loose ends together after about an hour and a half, so we can end the meeting under 2 hours, and to propose for an occasional meeting behind the scenes or no particular topic for things on people's minds, more personal concerns and engagement with Lord Hugh, especially regarding his work in welfare. What does everyone think? I'm okay.
I'm okay. Sounds good. Good idea.
I'm along for the ride, so whatever the rest of the group wants, it's fine with me.
All right.
What do you want to do, Hugh? Start with the exercises, or the exercise, or with?
yeah. Did anybody try them? Try them out, and what did they find?
My life is chaotic. I'm trying to establish some order, and I'm just trying to remember what the assignments are. But one good improvement is that I have a new supervisor at work, and he is trying to monitor our overtime. So I have not been working on the weekends as much as I was. So that's kind of given me a bit of breathing space, but it's still, I have a lot of catching up to do, the chaos in my house and personal life. But yeah, I think trying to make space just for the exercises is a challenge for me, but that's probably typical of most quote wage slaves unquote.
Yeah, you should try and do them just while you're doing all the rush of life, and the aim is to observe what's going on as it happens in your life, not necessarily to put your life on hold or anything. To do the exercises is to do it right while you're stuck in the maelstrom, kind of thing. But it's hard to remember. It's really quite a gift to get to the point where you notice that you're unhappy or things are not going well, or potentially when things are going really well, to just notice that and then just come to your senses. And so you don't want to think of it too much as a fix for your moods or anything, but it certainly can help you feel differently about depression or things like that. Basically, it's certainly after it is an instant relief from depression. Really, you don't really need to get any kind of SSRI from from a psych profession. You don't need Zoloft or Paxil or Prozac or anything. You can give yourself your own Prozac and your own serotonin just by doing, particularly the exercise where you just basically fall still and connect to your senses. So yeah, it's not something. I'm just saying it's not something that you need space to actually do. It's kind of it's almost like saying, well, my life's it's too hectic for me to take a sedative. It's like,
I know. I'm kind of a perfectionist in that and a procrastinator. So it's like, okay, things have to be perfect and smooth before I try something out. But that's precisely the opposite of what you're telling us.
Yeah, try it on in situ. You see, the exercises are really designed for you to catch a breath. So it's kind of oxymoronic to say, well, I'll do them when I have breath or time. Yeah.
There was a fellow I was reading some of his material quite a long time ago now, and I always remember one little exercise he recommended when you're having well, you know, if you're depressed or having some kind of unpleasant mood or whatever, and he said to focus your attention on it and sort of just ask yourself apparently silly questions, but they do make sense. He said, like, ask yourself, well, how big is this feeling? And what color is it? And what shape is it? And just point to it somewhere. Exactly where is it? Is it in your belly? Is it just like here or yeah, just find the dead center of it, you know, and then go back and tell me how big it is now, and has the color changed, or is it a different shape? And you know what you find is that if you try and do that, after a couple of minutes, there's nothing there. It's just gone away. It's just that the you once you become fully conscious of the feeling, um, it just fades away. After a little while, you find I'm not. You think you at first time you do it, you think you're failing the exercise because you think I can't find it, and I don't know what color it is because I don't know where it is, and I can't point to where it is. I can't find it anymore, and then you suddenly realize that, oh yeah, that's right, it's just not even there. But it was funny. I was only really yesterday thinking about that. I've never really understood what people mean when they say to uh, really go into your feelings and experience them fully, or really own your emotions and all that kind of thing. They always seem to be rather woolly statements that never meant much to me. But then I just suddenly realized that it was really saying exactly what that fellow's exercise was. The same thing, but I hadn't really clicked, I hadn't put it together. So
Yeah, see, a lot of these kind of emotions are fixed action patterns. They're just really repetitious behavior. And we seem to, you know, the West is so individualistic. We have this hyper individualism, and we give a lot of importance to our feelings. And now we've got a whole cancel culture that's based on not hurting somebody's feelings. And it's, you know, why does your right to speak, so free speech, trump somebody else's feelings? You know, all this kind of statement is feelings have become very, very important in our culture as we become more and more domesticated. And the self-esteem movement got going, particularly in America in the late 80s. But what happens with these things is they don't stand up to observation. They just kind of exist because of self-reinforcement. So, for example, they're a lot like a dog chasing its own tail. Now, if a dog chases its own tail, if you've ever seen one of those mad-ass dogs that gets into the habit of chasing its own tail, you can see what it's doing. It's basically, it forgets that it's its tail. It has this thing in its brain which obviously says, hey, there's a moving thing like a ball or something to catch. So at some stage, out of the corner of its eye, it's caught sight of its own tail and made some kind of false assumption like, hey, that's an interesting thing to go after. But here you have this concept of a thing to go after, and here you have the reality that it's the own bloody dog's tail. So it would be a much healthier dog if it went after a ball or a cat, bird or something. But because it's fixated on its own tail, it's gone into this feedback loop. And so it's chasing this nice thing to chase, which is a completely abstract concept that's really supposed to be associated with birds and cats and stuff. And it's fixated on something entirely inappropriate, and that's its own tail. Well, it spends an inordinate amount of time going round and round chasing this figment of its imagination. Now, we do the same thing. We come to the same kind of fantasy that say, you know, we're not worthy, or our life's a failure, or something like that, is a kind of a concept that we've caught out of the corner of our eye, and we keep on pursuing it, and we come back to it like we're chasing our own tail. And every time we come back to it and chase it, we're reinforcing that pattern till eventually you start liking it. It starts, eventually the dog gets some kind of entertainment and some kind of stimulus out of chasing its own tail. And then we get the same kind of thing out of chasing this circular thought that I'm an imposter, or I'm not worthy, or I'm a failure, or even sometimes even positive things like I'm a success. So, but it's generally negative, and we keep on reinforcing this loop. Now, what these exercises do is break that relationship. It's saying to the dog, in effect, that saying, where is this nice thing to chase? And the dog focuses maybe on the tail, but if you take it the other way and say, you know, where is your tail, or, you know, what is this? Then you break the association between this nice thing to chase and this false attachment to what it's chasing. So the same thing applies. Is if you say, well, I'm a failure as a human being, my whole career is washed up, or something like that, and you get fixated on, you ask who, and you go, well, me. But the more you examine it, the more it starts to disentangle itself, and the more it starts to dissolve, just like the dog suddenly noticing its tail instead of this concept of a thing to chase. So I hope that made some sense, but the observation of it makes it fall down, and that's why all these things work. If you ask people, who am I? Who's asking that question? And they say, well, me. And you say, well, who is this me? Ramana Maharshi said that you can basically reach enlightenment just by asking yourself, who am I? Who is this asking? Who is this observer? Try and chase it to its essence. Well, it is really a figment of your imagination. It's a construct. You know, everybody has this fiction that you are somebody, and you have this fiction that you are this person, certain person. But it doesn't really stand up to scrutiny. And all these attributes, like a successful career or an unsuccessful career and stuff, those two don't actually stand up to scrutiny. But we never examine them closely enough. And so we just keep on this repetitive behavior, and we get stuck in this rut. So all these things are designed to really knock you out of that rut. And to a certain extent, we don't want to be knocked out of it, because we get a kind of low-grade satisfaction. We get kind of endorphins from reinforcing this pattern over and over. And so we have this very kind of shitty high that's kind of cold comfort, and kind of just keeps us hostage in this fixed action, and doesn't let us break out to where we might get much more stimulus. And then you get various other aspects, like eventually we get scared of any higher stimulus than than what we used to, our little low-grade shitty version of reality. And so you get cut off, and you eventually get agoraphobia, and you get all these kind of phobias of having more stimulus. You basically get, you know, hermetism and all these kind of things where we want to stay in our own little shell and reinforce our own little negative thoughts. And so, yeah, so eventually that becomes something that's we're not only captivated by and incarcerated with our own thoughts, but we actively don't want to get out of them, because they're kind of low-grade comfort. But people try all sorts of unrealistic things to get out of them. A lot of the things with people cutting themselves, and even body modifications, like tattoos and you know, body piercings, all of these kind of things, all self-flagellation that all these Jesuits and stuff used to do, and some Christian sects and stuff still do. They all really to try and get you out of this, you know, to try and break you out of the dog chasing its tail kind of thing. It's kind of like, you know, if you if you whack the dog when it's chasing its tail, it'll shock it out of its behavior. And so it's kind of one part of our brain trying to shock the rest of our brain out of this circular behavior. So yeah, if you want another exercise, I think for sure you've got enough. But is to have a look at those circling thoughts and imaginings. And whenever you see them, is then do the very first exercise, which is really the most important exercise, and that's the one where you just fall still, hear what's in your hearing, feel your weight on the chair, or even if you're walking, you can feel your weight in your feet as you walk. But just quickly fall still and come to the idea of an embodied kind of awareness of yourself, and connect to all those senses: taste, hearing, feeling, just the air on your skin, clothes on your skin, that kind of thing. All 5 senses, and just be connected to those without thinking, and give it a go, because after a while you start to get some reward, in terms of hormones and dopamine, I think in particular, and it becomes nicer and nicer, and your world expands. And I think that the whole point of it is really, if you say that philosophy of life is the ripeness is all, that is a way to get ripe. If you're a dog chasing its tail the whole time, or you're stuck in the morbid thoughts, or you're depressed, you really are living a very small world, which seems like a waste of a life, right? It seems like you want a bigger world to have more meaning to it. But anyway, what do people think?
I agree. I think since I learned about doomerism and the state of the climate, I've gotten into a phase of depression, and I'll admit, depression and sadness. And I've always thought there has to be a way to break out of this. This isn't, in my mind, it's not the final. It didn't feel like it should be the final curtain. And then as I learn more about your work and even these techniques, there's been some chinks in those depression. It's liberating in a way. All those techniques, especially the just getting in tune with the senses. And I think it's starting to hit me now. And the thing that I'm realizing that's important is mutual aid. And I used to be, for whatever reason, afraid of reaching out to people. But like you said, it's been, I guess, expansion of your mind. And I think I'm starting to see that I'm expanding to actually at least reach out, even though some groups may not respond back. I found the urge to reach out to other groups, and I'm just gonna go from there. So I'm starting to see what you're saying.
Oh yeah, that's really cool.
Yeah.
I really like the sound of that, because if you just miss a social interaction or something, that's your entire primate brain is being deprived, and the same with the mammalian brain and your reptilian brain and stuff is all of them need their due. You can't. We live in a society where they're so dominated by the alien cortex, and each layer suppresses the lower layers to a large extent. On a daily basis, they kind of keep the lid on the lower layers. So we eventually get to the alien cortex, which keeps a lid on the whole stack. And it really makes for a very dead existence. And even to the point where people who are very dominated by the alien cortex, they talk in a monotone. And the reason is there's no color and flavor to their emotions. All the rest of those layers are really semi-dormant. And you just have this furious activity that basically all the glucose in their brain is being eaten up by this tiny little layer on the top. Now, if you have such a little stimulus to your brain, you can't really actually be anything other than depressed, because depression really is low activity. It's an anhedonia in the rest of the brain. And so it's only by doing these things for real, like mutual aid and stuff, It's a mistake to do mutual aid stuff from an alien cortex point of view, to say, I'm going to change the world, so I'm going to do it's like, do it for its own sake. It's just, you know, it can be anything. It doesn't really have to be for a noble goal. It doesn't have to be to save the planet. It can just be for its own sake, and it's tremendously expanding to just do something for other people. It's like having a new limb almost. It's like having a new brain layer, and so and it's been so taken from us by this cult of the individual, and particularly Darwinism. That's really why I made the Darwin series, is to try and make people to see otherwise. From like the Darwinism is just pure poison, and I do believe it's wrong. It's basically, it's not backed up by scientific evidence. So it's not a fight for survival and survival of the fittest. It's all about feedback and reinforcement. So if you take something like a mutual aid group, that is a focal point of attraction, just like, you know, the fractal theory of evolution, right? It's basically based on these locus of, you know, focuses of attraction and repulsion. Well, a group of people doing mutual aid is a strong attractor, especially for our primate brains and our mammalian brains. And even if it's intellectually stimulating, it can be an attractor for your alien cortex. So those are an attractor. Then the next thing is feedback. So it's not survival of the fittest. What's really making and driving humans and evolution and life, as I think, is reinforcement. So mutual aid is self-reinforcing. It's just, you know, we've abstracted human interaction into the dollar. So everything is mediated by dollars and middlemen. And so the dollars are self-reinforcing. That's why capitalism doesn't work. That's why Bezos and all these guys are getting richer. It's called a Matthew effect, because in the Bible, Matthew said the rich always get richer. And that's, you know, the easiest way to make $1 million is to have $1 million. If you give me $1 million, I'll make it into 10 million easy. If you give me $10, it's really, really hard to make it into $100. But if you give me $1 billion, I can make it $100 billion falling off a log. It's as easy as pie. But so the reason is that dollars make dollars. That's a feedback loop. And what that feedback loop is, we've abstracted human relations, which should be done on a face-to-face level in a mutual group. But if you start doing those mutual interactions and you start interacting that way, you have a Matthew effect right there in a social setting. That's it's removed the intermediary of having a dollar between you and your fellow person. And so it encourages, you know, solidarity, mutual support, and a bigger feeling, a feeling of an expanded ego that's at least the size of all the people, you know, at least at Dunbar's number worth of them, about, you know, 150 to 250 people. And it's a big threat to the system. It is an act of rebellion in itself, because it means that you're finding a source of rejuvenation that's outside the economy, the dollar-based economy, and it's finding a new economy. It's reestablishing social connections and human connections, and all of those are very threatening to the system, because if people unite outside of basically the Leviathan, if you're not in tune with the ant colony, and in essence, you're making private ant colonies, that's a threat to the major ant colony. And so then it is an act of rebellion. So yeah, good from so many angles. But anyway, what did people think of what I just said?
Yeah, it's great stuff. The only thing I'd add is it took me a while to even understand the detriments of individualism as portrayed by the American system, the American way of life. Just your videos on the Darwin on Darwin, and also Adam Curtis's videos helped me understand that it's not the way to go. I mean, individualism's toxic, and yeah.
It's toxic for the individual.
Oh yeah, yeah.
And for the bigger society. So it is this idea of, you know, if we all compete, then the best emerges. But it's really exploitative, and it's really a power game. And what they're really doing is dividing a prison yard. So if all the people in the prison yard work together with solidarity, they can easily undermine the prison. They put the prison at risk. But if you can make all the prisoners, it's divide and conquer. If you can make them all atomic, they can never get cohesion. You can always single them out. Basically, you can never. It's the whole thing about Spartacus. That famous thing in that scene in the movie Spartacus where they try and single out Spartacus so they can cut the head off the rebellious beast. And they say, well, you're all going to be killed unless you cough up Spartacus. And so they say, stand up, Spartacus, and Spartacus stands up and says, I'm Spartacus. And then the person next to him stands up and says, I'm Spartacus. And they all stand up and say, I'm Spartacus. And what that does is defeat the Romans, because they can't really cut off the heads of all the slaves. They can't really defeat all the ants. They can only do it by singling them out. So if they all stand together in solidarity, they're finished. But it's very, very hard for the ants to keep solidarity. They always board away. So it's another part of that was in the Matrix movie. You remember in the first Matrix movie, the guy was bought, by crap in the Matrix. They said, he said, I just want to forget the real world. I just want to live in the Matrix. I just want to taste steak and champagne. Give me a nice life. And I said, okay, that's fine. Just sell out the truth about the Matrix. And that is the problem. Is most people will sell out. And so the most dangerous people, since the beginning of the revolution, since cities first started, was the middle class. It's the liberals, because they always sell out for small change. They'll always sell out for a steak and a glass of wine and a shitty life by any standards, but a reasonable life. So it's the prison mentality, and the worst of the prisoners will say, well, we won't break down the prison, we won't go against the prison system. We just want better barracks in the prison. So just give us a nicer cell than the rest, and we're with the program. And so that's since time immemorial, the bourgeois, the middle class, the liberals and stuff, they have been the threat to the revolution, because they always held the system together. It's basically the house slaves always kept the plantation together. They ratted on what the field slaves were doing. They sold out all the rebellions. So no rebellion can bring down the plantation system, while the house slaves are intermediary between the two. But what's happening now is, and this is why it's important from the point of view of social change and rebellion, is that the middle class is disappearing. What COVID will do is this inequality. Everybody says we must reduce inequality. It's like bullshit. We want tons more inequality, because inequality can end the system. It's basically, while these guys come in like Biden and stuff and prop up the middle class, and it reinforces this rotten system, which you can say, well, I like this system. Well, say, well, it hasn't got much longer to go. If you carry on with this system, the Earth's habitat, human habitat's going to disappear. So it's unsustainable. So it's better off that we have masses of inequality, and when there's no middle class left, then there'll be a rebellion. So it's all these feelers that you're putting out to mutual aid and stuff, they are the future. And Biden and solar panels and the Green New Deal is the past. So the conservatives are trying to turn the clock back to the 1950s, when America was, manufacturing, and it's a complete misunderstanding of the financial system and why America was great in the 50s, which was, due to the war and Bretton Woods, and that's on the conservative side. And then on the Democratic side, they're trying to turn back the clock, to always somewhere around Roosevelt and the Green New Deal, somewhere, something like that. They're trying to turn back the clock to, Biden has turned back the clock to Obama. It's like, and you can't. All of these people are retrograde. So looking forward to the future is this. What you're doing is important in terms of, what's a smart strategy for the future and just a smart strategy for being human. And as soon as you start doing that, you get through doomerism, because part of what doomerism is stuck. It's basically a stalemate. It's basically you reach a point of helplessness where you just look at the state of the planet and everything, and it's like, what the fuck do you do? It's just, but it's a good stage. I keep on posting doomerous stuff and stuff because it's very good for destroying people's ego. What people need to do is to get beyond this thing where they can, it's part of ego to think that you can do something for the planet. So this whole thing about being vegan and, personal choices, lifestyle choices, activism and XR, all of them are delusions. They're absolutely fucking badass delusions. And the delusion is that we actually mount a pile of beans as individuals, whereas none of us do. And so our ego and, the system reinforces the fact that you're very important, which you're not. There's 7.8 billion people that are super important. I don't think so. I think there's 0 people that are important. And so it's a conceit, and it's the source of, eventually, it doesn't really work. Because, you can be an activist for all you like, you're not going to make a dent. And then as you realize you're not going to make a dent, it makes you depressed, because you're saying, I'm ineffectual and stuff. Now, people think, well, what do I do? Well, it's great. It's great. It's what you really want. But you need to feel more depressed. you need to you need to be so hopeless that you crack. And then you're getting somewhere. But unfortunately, there's so many people that are out there like Michael E. Mann and stuff to say like, no, there's hope, and come back from the brink, and we'll make solar panels and we'll make a fix and stuff. And you're saying like, you're wasting time. You're wasting valuable time doing that, because we need to get to a point where everybody cracks. And what's cracking is the ego and the alien cortex. So part of the reason why vaccines are bad, and all these geoengineering, solar radiation management, all these things are bad, because they're reinforcing this ego that has no future. And so as soon as people reach absolute hopelessness, then they're getting somewhere. But unfortunately, we're doing the exact opposite. We're trying to stoke hope and stuff. And the reason is it's part of the slave narratives. Slaves don't work unless you keep their morale up. So you want to slam their morale down until basically the slave can't get out of bed. When the slave can't get out of bed, then the slave plantation is at risk. And if the slave plantation is at risk, then we have a chance of getting freedom. But until that idea gets out there, basically, if we just as a group manage to do anything, it would be to plant the seed in people that hopelessness is good. Hope is toxic. It's evil. Anybody that comes up with anything hopeful is like smash him down. Well, that's what I think. What do you think?
Yeah, I agree. There has to be. It's sad to say, but people's emotion, they have to kind of get broken down before they can. I'm starting to see the importance of that. Rome had to fall so other civil groups can thrive again. Things have to fall so new things can grow. I think that's important.
Yeah, that's an important thing you raised there, because if you go back to all these civilizations, right to the very first city-state like Sumer, when Sumer fell, all the barbarians swooped in. They don't really know who they were, but they came from the hills above Mesopotamia, and it's all the same story as when empires get weak, then the barbarians start swooping in from everywhere, and they seem to come out of the woodwork and kind of take their revenge. Now, a common theme throughout history for the last 7,000 years has been that history is written by the alien cortex, is written by the victors, and is written by civilization. So whenever civilization falls, all the clerics and the scribes and all the apparatus and bureaucracy, that all disappears. And so they automatically say, well, that's a bad thing because the home team is having trouble. But if you look beyond that and you have a look at the lives of all these barbarians and stuff, you actually see, no, they're actually superior. That most people had more freedom, that things actually got load better. There were no slaves. All these things which don't fit with our narrative that civilization is wonderful and the Dark Age is awful. Now when people go and look at the Dark Ages and say, hang on a minute, this was only dark if you're like a monk or a king or all the bad guys. So all the bad guys get swept off the stage. Because the bad guys write the history, they say it's a bloody awful time. And it's like, oh, it's the Dark Ages and anarchy and stuff. But if you go and have a look, a lot of the people, one of the things that's really telling is that anybody that has the choice between civilization or going over to the barbarians invariably goes to the barbarians. It's a great source of disappointment for civilized people that savages are not interested in civilization. In fact, they hightail it as soon as they can. And that even goes to like Darwin. Darwin brought 3 guys from Patagonia back on the Beagle, and they civilized the guys, and they brought them up in English society and taught them table manners and how to eat. And then they took them back to Terra del Fuego and to try and get them to like civilize the rest. They thought they would seed them with civilization. And they came back a few years. Darwin was devastated to find that they'd all turned native again. They'd got rid of all their fine clothes and all their Christianity, and so they couldn't ditch it fast enough. And Darwin and stuff thought it was a tragedy that, civilization is so hard to keep a hold of. But it never occurs to these cretins that basically civilization is not that hot because everybody ditches it as soon as they can. So it doesn't stand up to scrutiny. But it's interesting that you say that is, you see, that's the narrative that we're going through now. A lot of the reasons why people are depressed is because they're siding with the wrong team. They're deciding with the civilization and the team that has no hope of coming through. So then they look at everything through the wrong side of the lens. And so they start to see 10 cities going up in Los Angeles and stuff like that. And they think this is terrible. And all the statistics, the less jobs, and you see all this decline. And then they take that as, this is really bad news. And you say no, it isn't. You should be celebrating. This is like the Auschwitz is crumbling in front of your eyes. You should be celebrating every stone that comes down, every statistic that looks bad. So, but nobody does. They all side with the slave masters. And you say, you're a slave. Why do you lament the end of the plantation? There is, to be fair, there is a lot to lament in the end of the plantation, but it's that's the advanced course. So civilization is really something quite amazing. I have to. I mentioned this to Gary. I got a mea culpa for myself that I absolutely adore civilization. Although I spend all my time being anti-servant stuff, secretly I love engineering and I love civilization. I love all these things. But they all tempered with the fact that they're all rather toxic and terminal. So I kind of, I feel like I'm a recovering engineer and I feel like an alcoholic. But civilization is the best drug you can have, but you still, like a drug addict, lament its passing. So, and the same with civilization itself. So if you think of, particularly it comes across in a movie like Gone with the Wind, which it's hard, it's not really accessible now to to Americans because it's too politically incorrect. And that's maybe you in the South, you can see it a bit. But what Gone with the Wind is saying is those plantations are a wonderful way of life. And you say, yeah, wonderful for plantation owners. And you say, yeah, even the slaves have a place that they're going to lose in with freedom. They're going to become peons and get even worse off after the end of the movie. But the plantation system, and that you can't just do what liberals do today and just say, oh, it's just evil and it was exploitative. And you say, yeah, it was all that. But there is a kind of, everybody likes going into a manor house that's wonderful and have, see a ball and dance and to the music and have all that romance and stuff. So you can't be too harsh on civilization, really. You have to, in quieter moments, temper the fact that it's fucking batshit crazy from stem to stern. I mean, going to the moon is batshit crazy, but you have to admit that it was fucking wonderful at the same time. I mean, it's complete horseshit, and we need to get rid of it. But it's not to say that secretly, although I would go to my grave swearing otherwise. Yeah, going to the moon might have been humans' high point, but don't ever ask me to quote that.
I think that perhaps, I'm just guessing, part of the depression that some people feel is precisely the going away and grieving for civilization. Just, like a hot bath, Netflix, although I don't watch Netflix, but, all the things that we have now, they're slowly going away. Maybe not slowly, maybe suddenly they'll be gone. We wake up and a lot of it's gone. So part of the depression could be just lamenting the passing of what all these things that are really not sustainable.
Yeah, and the thing is to not try and suppress that grief, because it's not quite like you won't have a hot bath again and stuff. Is you can easily have a hot bath. It's just not the
Yes.
same, right? I mean, yeah, you see, the tendency is we have loss aversion. As humans, we tend to notice what we lose and not be, there's a 2-to-1, I believe. 2-to-1, it sounds about right. But there's a 2-to-1 discounting that we have psychologically for loss aversion. So it's literally a bird in the hand is worth two in the bush. That to recover something that you take for granted now, or barely even recognize that you have it in civilization now, if you lose that, you need at least twice that to make up for it out of new things. So that means that we're going to grieve what we lose. One of the shitty things is you lose it as an individual. So you lose your high-paying job, and you lose it. So nobody has, or you really get the sense of collective loss. So, for example, like in South Africa, a lot of milestones are gone, and as you pass them collectively, the whole nation passes them collectively. They'll never come back. So, for example, we've just passed one now. Almost certainly, we've passed a milestone with this pandemic, where you can just travel around the world with ease and have vacations. I mean, just with Brexit, we've passed a place where Brits can have summer holidays in Spain carelessly, have a stag party in Istanbul or in Prague or something. Is those have passed, and now when people lose their jobs or downgrade to a job or something like that, their income deteriorates or they get on hard times, they take that all personally and only really have the solidarity of saying, no, we're all in it together. It's all a bit of a shit time. And so generally we have to take these knocks personally, one after another, as personal failings, when they're not. They're systemic. So that's one thing. And the other thing is that we don't notice the gains. So if you wind up in a tent city, you just lament the fact that you lost your apartment. You don't you don't celebrate all the stuff that you might have in that tent, and that's basically you have better parties on a Saturday night. You might have easy access to sex and drugs, or you might have free time. So you see, it's very easy to get into a situation where you think like, I'm unemployed, and now my life is shitty because I don't have a job. And you say, yeah, but look at your free time. You know what you can do with that free time. So
Yes, that's a very good perspective, to just not focus on the losses, but look at the gains. And maybe the gains, are there, they put you in a better place than where you were.
yeah, well, think of it from the guys in Terra del Fuego that got dropped off by Darwin. Like, so if you think, they go back to, they think, well, economically speaking, they're really going down market. They're going from like a manor house to a grass hut. Now, think carefully. It's probably a good exercise to think, if you were taken out of a manor house and put in a grass hut, you would think, well, I've lost hot baths. I've lost, being able to go to the kitchen and I've lost a fridge. I've lost a place to just cook and stuff. And then now think how hard it is to notice what you've gained in a grass hut. Because for starters, you don't notice the lot of subtle things like your health that probably improves markedly if you can't go to a fridge. You spend a lot of time walking and going outdoors and interacting with nature, and you get a lot closer to nature. But all of those things can pass you by just because you color them with the fact that you've now suffered a loss instead of a gain. But it's entirely psychological. There's no reason to say like, well, I used to be in the manor house, now I'm free. I don't have to clean it. I don't have to worry about it. I don't have to insure it. I don't have to license it. I don't have to pay taxes. Basically, suddenly they all start stacking up.
That's
So,
right. There's so much overhead to being the lord of the manor. So much stress to keep things going, juggling.
yeah, think of it. Everybody wants to be like Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos. I mean, I've had times in my life where I've been relatively rich, and I tell you, it's a drug because it's very stimulating when you in business and stuff. But as for your quality of life, basically, those guys are doing shit things all the time. People are putting things in front of them that legal documents, and they have to sign, and all the time they're talking about shitty stuff. It's basically beating this guy, dealing with that, crooking on this. It's all basically crookery. So it's like playing chess the whole time, and they're in the alien cortex. So you can it's like being on cocaine for a while because it's stimulating, like playing a game of chess. But it's also very shitty to play chess all the time. You'd be better off like chilling out and not playing chess and reading a book and swimming in the sea, stuff like that. So those guys never get to do that. If you're Jeff Bezos, you never really get to just dabble your feet in the water. Whenever you do it, it's on the way somewhere. It's with a bodyguard. It's with some guy trying to talk to you, talk business to you. Your time's never your own, and so everybody wants to be the king, but as soon as they are the king, their life is shitty. And so it's kind of good to think like, I'm no longer the king, but man, being a pauper has got its upsides, especially if you know both. Actually, all of this, by the way, is covered quite well in King Lear. Very good to read King Lear again.
Here I was thinking about I wish I could remember who it was. Very good talk. The fellow was talking about modern civilization, and one of the factors of collapse being that as you create this increasingly complex structure, more and more of your energy and time needs to go into simply the maintenance of what you have already created and uphold, whether physically or in other ways. And, he was just putting forward the idea that after a certain point, you've created such an amazing, complexity. But it's just you're really stuck because most of your energy is just got to feed back into trying to keep it in order. You reach a stage where you can't move ahead, where you don't have the time or energy or resources to try anything new. It's just being absorbed in feeding back into trying to keep what you've got. Because it's grown. I was thinking of what you said about the manor house, where you're completely tied up with all the extraneous things to do with it. But the other thing I was thinking of too, when you were talking about the grass hut, was back at the video you posted about Coronation Park in South Africa, and which is a camp, essentially a camp for poverty-stricken white people in South Africa. But I think that the thing that we were talking about regarding that at the time was how, even though those people were in unpleasant circumstances, the impression you got from them and from the place was that it was much realer. That they seem to be living more authentic human existences than the the surrounding so-called civilization. And so they'd lost, as you were saying, you lose a lot on one side, but then when you look at what is there in place of that, which might not be immediately obvious, but they had their time, they had a sort of a community where people knew each other, and there was none of the pretension of competition and all this kind of thing going on. So it was a interesting example, I guess, of what you were saying.
Yeah, one of the things that makes it difficult to go down in the world, especially if you like those people in Coronation Park, is that you don't have a tradition. So you're cut off from your tradition. You see, for example, take those people in Coronation Park. They could quite easily be gypsies. Then there would be, or you've got to call them Roma people these days, but politically correct. So yeah, they could quite easily be Roma people. And then they would have all the traditions of gypsies, and they would have the folk music, they would have even folk dress at one stage. And so there's a long tradition that makes them identify with that kind of camp life. And then it's something highly desirable, and it's kind of romantic. But they're living exactly like the guys in Coronation Park. The difficulty for the guys in Coronation Park is they came from Dutch Calvinists and English imperialist upbringing. So that's a narrative of, it's a hero narrative of champions and superior race and very much alien cortex. And so they've betrayed their tradition because they cut off from that tradition. According to that tradition, they're complete failures. Now you see the difference is that it's all in your mind. You'd be living the same life if you're a gypsy or a poor white in Coronation Park. It's just the poor whites feel dreadful about it because they have this different ideal. And the gypsies feel great about it because it's their heritage and they're getting all these tribal and cultural emotions. So what it implies is that if we are headed that way, and a lot more people are headed for difficulty, in other words, civilization is coming apart at the seams, then we want to invent new traditions. And so cults and things are not bad. From that point of view, you will see cults appear, and you will see people developing new traditions, and you will see vast resistance to it. So we've already seen it. We've seen it before our eyes, but nobody can really interpret it. Nobody is really acknowledging it. But we saw it with the Capitol riot. The Capitol riot is a new tribe. It has its own shaman. It basically has its own conspiracy theories, which are traditions. The conspiracy theories of QAnon are not any, I mean, they're relatively sane compared to, say, the San Bushmen. The San Bushmen have some fucking wacky theories about life and stuff. I mean, I'll just give you one of them, for example, that throughout history, the history of our species, we are brilliant at coming up with bullshit. And so, for example, the San Bushmen have what they call star fever. And what they think the stars are not very far away, and they occasionally fall off the firmament and fall down to Earth. When they fall down to Earth, they're little glowing balls about yay big, about the size of a badger, and they go running around on the ground. If you happen to tread on one or touch one accidentally, you get very, very sick. And they call that star fever. It's like, what the fuck? But anyway, all indigenous people have all these weird fucking beliefs. It's just part and parcel.
Yeah. Look, but the thing is, it doesn't matter what their story is. It's just got to be a coherent story.
Yeah, that's it. Yeah.
We only crave an explanation. It doesn't matter if it's bullshit, as long as it's like I remember one day I was with my mother, and she's got a very strange psychology. She's kind of not dumb, but she can be, I don't know, seem remarkably childlike for some reason. And she's not well educated. And we were sitting in the car looking at the waves come into the shore. And or the tide was coming in. That's right. We could see the tide gradually moving up the shore. She said, "Oh, what causes that? Why do the tides come in?" And so I just sat there doing the dutiful thing, explaining about the moon and the sun and all water sloshing around and all. And she was just falling asleep. And I said, "You don't like it, do you?" And she, it just wasn't working. So I just invented a bullshit story. And even though she knew I was inventing a bullshit story about water gods playing around out there and creating tides and all the rest of it, at the same time, that's what she wanted. She wanted a story that was sort of engaging and that you could imagine stuff and brought it all alive. And it didn't matter. It just didn't matter, at all.
But she's absolutely right. It's our culture that's wrong. You see, if you look at the QAnon conspiracies, then all these liberals say but this is bullshit. It's quite obviously wrong. And you say, well, our culture is all alien cortex, and it has this conceited belief that there is a right story, that there are facts, and you can have debunkings, and and there is this objective truth, and basically it's held by people that are experts, and people that go to college know the difference between right and wrong and truth and fiction and stuff. And you say, no, that's all your fucked up star fever version of the universe. It's entirely unwarranted, and you don't have to go very far to show. I mean, I can show you a scientific paper that says over half of scientific papers are wrong. I mean, not slightly wrong conclusions are wrong. They're wrong fundamentally from method, from basically the basics of science. They are wrong. So the majority of science papers are bullshit. They're Enid Blyton. But you can't tell that to a liberal. It's like, these are experts and these are science. But objectively, by reviews of them have shown that all science is junk. I mean, literally, all science is junk. Very rare you get a paper that isn't horseshit. But why it kind of works is the the horseshit accumulates, and there's a kind of weeding process. So it kind of works, but it's it's like the way we think of it is like a study shows that blah blah blah, and there's like, oh right, that's the truth now. And it's no, it was two fucking undergraduates who don't know their fucking ass from their elbows. But we don't, in our story, science is the font of truth and stuff. They say no, that's just our myth. Conspiracy theories are not wrong any more than science theories. So QAnon and so what they're doing is correct from your grandmother's point of view, because the science view is pure alien cortex, and it says it just appeals to the intellect, and it's all black and white and very dry and unappealing, and that's our explanation of tides. But if you say it's something quite romantic, and you explain it in terms of, say, myth and legends, and so Greek versions of why the tides happen, you're engaging the reptilian brain and the mammalian brain and say, of course it's far more true. The lights are going on in a lot more places than if you'd explain this thin, dry layer to the alien cortex. So there's a bigger truth than just this simple alien cortex, this dry black and white truth, which is every bit a construction and a fiction than any other batshit crazy myth or stuff that now we dismiss. It might as well be a dream. So it doesn't have any more merit than anything else. But you can't tell that to liberals and today. It's because they they believe that what they're doing is beyond belief, and it has something to do with science. And it's like, no, it isn't. I mean, just in my Darwin videos, I can show you that Darwin's religion. But no one will believe you because it's like, it's not religion, it's science. It's like bullshit. It's all religion. So very difficult sell to the average reader, because we think we've actually got somewhere. And then it horrifies people that, how are these people so backward? Basically the capital riders, how can they possibly be so backward? And say, well, no, I mean, they're doing what is going to happen a lot more, and that's they're starting a different culture. They're starting countercultures. And so their counterculture narrative is far more advanced than it is on the left. So I worry about the left is going to struggle during collapse a lot more. So although you think of the left as hippies, all going to form a commune and they're all going to do permaculture, no, that's not the way this works. It's basically you're going to do permaculture like you're going to grow weed in somebody else's turf in a tent city. That's how your permaculture is going to go. Unless you can offend your permaculture with a gun, you basically. I don't think the hippies are going to shape in this. So yeah, that's a little narrative waiting for a crash and burn as well. I think the right and the preppers and stuff, the libertarians, they're actually more in advance in terms of collapse and collapse resilience, which will blow the mind of a lot of people on the left that think they're green and they're thinking in terms of community, and you're just like, nah, you're not really. It's kind of fake. It's this kind of fake little narrative that really is based on, basically liberal privilege. But when all that liberal privilege crashes, I mean, look, cut straight to the chase. You're not going to be doing Kerry Sherman permaculture and regenerative culture when you're in Coronation Park. So the guys in Coronation Park are a lot more in tune with the Capitol rioters than they are with, solar panels and social justice and stuff like that. So I think the left needs to get over that silly narrative and get onto a genuine, resilience narrative. And I'll say one more thing. I'm sorry to bore you to tears here, but Jem Bendell and the deep adaptation guys, those kind of narratives for adaptation, I think they genuinely alarm me, because I think those guys are heading for a big hurt. And the hurt that they're doing is, without them realizing it, they are doing a cult narrative. But they're doing the cult narrative that I keep on posting again and again out of frustration that I don't think people are hearing what I'm saying, is that if you look at that solar cult thing that I posted, if you look at the Heaven's Gate, Jonestown, Devcris, they all have the same thing. It's just, they're almost identical. they have this utopian idealism, very closely interlinked. What happened? They have a leader like Jan Bendel, and it's all carry, sherry, sugary spice. And then what happens is eventually that leader gets cancer. What happened with Marshall Applewhite, and happened with the guy, both guys who led the Solar Temple, was they eventually get terminally ill. Now, what they've done with those cults is they have an ego boundary that's as big as those cults. So when they personally are dying, they take the whole cult with them. They have the reason why they all commit suicide is so that they die with the master. It's kind of like the pharaohs. They get all the pharaoh's slaves are buried with the pharaoh when they die. It's the same with Indians doing sati. The Hindus think of their wife as part of themselves. So they think, I'm dying. Well, it's not right that part of myself survives. I must take my wife with me, and that's sati. She jumps on the fire. It's the same like the terracotta army in China. When you get a big enough emperor who represents the entire nation, when the emperor dies, he says well, my ego is the size of this nation, so it is. It's like Louis XIV. Le tats c'est moi. Basically says, I am the state. So the emperor dies, and he's saying I am China. Therefore, when I die, China dies. So all you guys basically get in the pit with me. And I think what happened with the terracotta army, the guys had some get out clause, and they said, can we do a little symbolic, we'll just symbolically be with you in heart and spirit. We'll make a little terracotta image of ourselves and bury that. Is that okay? And the emperor probably went, fuck it, okay, I'll go with that. And I think that's what happened with the terracotta army. But in essence, you get the will, you get the dynamic, and that's basically when the leader is where the leader goes, and it's part of QAnon is where we go one, we go all, and it's really things where the leader goes, we go. So we live and die with the leader, and that's not a very good way to go, because humans are mortal, and those guys are going to peg out at some stage, and they're going to take everybody with them. So yeah, go and join deep adaptation. Exile has shows signs of being on that path, but go and join them if you want. If your ideal in collapse is to go out with phenobarbital around a campfire singing Kumbaya, believing horseshit, go for it. That's the path that you're on. But I feel that there's another way to get a cult, and if you have enough awareness to say we're not doing that version, we're doing the version where maybe we might squeak through on this, right? So yeah, that's my thinking on that, on the whole topic of mythology and creating the myth. Yeah, we should.
We should just stop for a minute.
Yeah, we must. Yeah.
Feel your fingers and toes, and notice your breath, and that kind of thing, for a moment.
Yeah,
and,
actually, let me lead you through it. And so just sit, sort of like balanced and erect, and just feel your spine straight. So and yeah, close your eyes. Just imagine you could be being kind of pulled up from the crown of your head by a thread. So imagine that you're hanging like that. But so your stomach muscles are roughly semi-tightened. Not, you don't want to kind of be slouching. And so you must feel that your thorax is kind of raised, and just put your palms flat on your thighs, and then just fall still. Just immediately just be conscious of your face, and make sure that your face is not tense in any way. So particularly around your eyes and your eyebrows, just release the tension without squinting or making a fuss. Just let that tension go. And the rest of your face and your jaw, just let that tension go. Let the tension go around your neck. Don't exercise or do anything. Just be aware of the tension. Just let it go. Okay, become aware of your breath, but don't change your breathing. Now see behind your eyes, just look behind your eyelids. Focus your attention there without squinting, just relax, feel deeply relaxed. Be conscious of your hearing, go out to the most distant sound. Let the sound come to you, don't let your attention wander out. Be aware of your taste, the weight on the chair, your feet on the floor, the weight of your hands and shoulders. Go back to your neck and face and make sure there's no tension. Just release it. And fall deeply still. And rest with the sight behind your eyelids. If you can see that kind of a halo, then just keep watching it and relax in that sight. Okay. How about that? Okay. So, yeah, in the cult I was in, and I think it's kind of a tradition. They would always say at that point, like Om Paramatmane Nama Iti. That means Om, in the name of that supreme Atman. It's done. Some of it's not done for you. It's done for that supreme Atman, the personal self, the universal self. Not for you. You see, the difference is that in all the self-help gurus and stuff like that, people are doing all of this for themselves. It's all an ego trip, and it's kind of to break that ego trip. Yeah. That was the general idea. Yeah. Alrighty. So yeah. Any other questions? How's this going, by the way?
I have a comment regarding the Manor House and everything. I remember last year some stores, they went out of business, like Modell's and Lord and Taylor. And I'm like, okay, so they went out of business. There's too many stores anyway, so you don't need, how many stores do you need? You need a variety, but you know.
And also, it's a transition to other things. Like it might cause people to look at other sources of like local food and things like that. I think the industrial food system needs to end. So those kind of things might shock people into doing, looking at other sources of food. I like to think that at least some people in Texas and stuff must have taken the option to think, maybe, industrialized food system is not such a good idea. Yeah, the governments all over the world, if the governments know, I think that we're heading for a brick wall, and one of the things they should really be doing is, making food more resilient, doing the opposite of what they're doing now, and that's deconstructing the big food companies and Monster and Sanito and all those kind of guys. They're thinking more and more in terms of an industrial food system and closing down small farmers, and they should be thinking the other way of trying to encourage agriculture and small holdings and farms, and reverse the trend, which is hugely gone the wrong way. They're only 3%. I think 3% of Americans now work in agriculture. And as recently as the war, I think that over 50% were working in agriculture. And so
here that video of Russell Brand a few days ago, talking about the Indian farmers, and effectively that's what's happening there, heading in the wrong direction. Where they're all small landholders, and they're going to end up being bought out and controlled by the corporations. So they if they could maintain their system, they might have a hope, but they're in the process of breaking it down.
Yeah, Indian farmers is a very sad situation. So I went there in like 2007, and I went to some farms, and the farms I went to were in a communist region, and they were having a riot when I was there, and a lot of demonstrations, like demonstrations in India, like millions of people because people have a lot of people to get, and so they were very dramatic looking. But what the riots were about was about tractors. So what the government was trying to do was to trying to give them loans for tractors and get tractors in because they wanted to make farming more efficient. And why they were rioting is because the Communist Party insisted that farms are tilled by hand. And the reason is there's so many people that farm by hand, and they put out of work by a tractor. So then what happens is the government wants to get more revenue. So they want the farms to be more efficient. So then they basically give loans so the farmer can get a tractor. But all these other people that work on the land are suddenly displaced. And so you have, hundreds of people displaced by one tractor, maybe 500 people by one tractor. And so what those 500 people are supposed to do is then go and get into the industrial economy. And so it drives them into urbanization. So they're driven off the land. The land becomes kind of like a Western farm where you have these vast areas just, done by mechanized agriculture, just by combine harvesters that run on their own. They're tracked by satellites, and very few people involved. It's highly mechanized, highly chemical, and it's efficient for a while, but it means suddenly the farmers have to borrow lots to get the tractor. They have to borrow to get the petrochemicals and fertilizers. The soil is fucked up entirely because you go from a system where all these guys are driving oxen and cows, basically across the fields and using dung. They use that dung as fuel, and they use it as fertilizer. Now, as soon as you get a tractor, all those cows are, I don't know, they don't eat them, but I guess they just transport them to the West so they can get processed in a meat factory. But you can see the way it goes. Is basically then you have all these people that are reliant on a tractor, agrochemicals, industrial stuff, and that's where Bill Gates is trying to send it. And all these people wind up in a city, and then everybody says, well, that's good because cities are greener. It's all horseshit, because if people survive in a city, they're either in part of the slums, in the growing number of slums, which is where most people wind up, or if they successfully industrialize them, then they wind up being consumed, and they start flying around and start getting incredible luxurious tastes that the planet can't sustain. So the whole idea is that you turn the world into America. And America is unsustainable. The whole world is feeding America. And it was all done by Bretton Woods and the dollar hegemony. And now China is trying to overtake that place. So the planet is going to crack as China goes from having half the per capita income of an American to try and equal and then exceed, and then tend to do it in the next 10 years. So we are fucked. We are absolutely fucked.
Well, you can see it. Yeah. You can see that in that graph. I think you put that graph up showing the energy consumption of Bitcoin, and it was off towards the left-hand end. But if you go over to the right-hand end, so if you go to the other end and look at the massive spike for China and the USA in terms of their energy consumption, it's like, the next nearest, that was number one and number two, but number three was like orders of magnitude way down, this huge drop-off to the next one down. when you see it displayed, presented like that, it's pretty amazing.
Yeah, but I look at that other graph with the trends in energy consumption. So
Oh, the
everybody does
primary
this
energy,
partial, yeah, everybody does this,
yeah.
what I call thinking in frames, and they have this
Mm.
framework where we all get to transition to renewables. Well, transition's happened. Energy transition has happened, and it's over. It was a transition from coal to natural gas. But all that's going to happen now is that coals kind of will remain steady, and natural gas will increase 30% by 2030. Oil will increase 30% by 2030 until it runs out. And so although renewables might get to 28%, they're not going to grow as fast as fossil fuel usage. And it's not a matter of policy. It's not something you can go and do a banner drop about and XR can campaign about, because all they're doing is making Western countries offshore their energy requirements faster. That's all they're doing, is turning Britain into a financial hub, so that Britain can, and America can finance this carbon footprint of Chinese prosperity. So you are actually being counterproductive. In XR, you're actually being counterproductive, because you're hastening the demand for energy by offshoring your carbon footprint to China. And and it just gets worse as you add this new infrastructure, new windmills, new EVs and stuff, new wind turbines and PV and stuff. They're all manufactured in China, and they all go up in CO2 in the next 10 years. So it's compounding the problem. You'll never recover the carbon from a wind turbine, or the manufacturing footprint of a wind turbine and stuff. So we're in such deep trouble. It's unbelievable. And yeah, I feel like the governments know it. I mean, I don't think this is news to any government. They're faking out the population, and the population is being willingly duped. If you look at the tone of the mainstream and the kind of free hopium and stuff, and just look at it next to one of those graphs, and you know that the average mainstream media outlet is talking horseshit. And people are lapping it up. But we're back to this mythology that a culture has. We are in a cult. We have a mythology, and the mythology is that all this stuff is good. Civilization is good, and we're going to green it. We're going to have social justice, and nothing of the sort's going to happen. But again, what you said, Gary, about complexity. Things tend towards complexity because if you try and manage something, you get two extra problems for every problem you fix. So that's what happens to all empires. There was a theory of empires collapsing because of complexity. So if you see something like the Ottoman Empire, we get our word from Byzantine, which means so complicated it's unworkable. And the Ottoman Empire, the Byzantine Empire, that's the way it became. It tried to have a perfect system where, a perfect legal system, but every one point of clarification in the law that you got two exceptions. So you need to clarify those. And then clarifying those created two other loopholes, and you had to clarify that. And eventually you have a whole body of legislation and law and bureaucracy and military, and that's vastly complicated. And it becomes so unwieldy that it became, the sick man of Europe, and it collapsed. Basically, Lawrence of Arabia just kicked it in because it was so top heavy. And that's where we've got to now in terms of, that's why AI and all of these things are the opposite of a solution. They're saying it's kind of like the Ottomans saying, we'll double down on complexity and technology, and then everything will be better. But it's, it always works the opposite way around, so that you don't get flying cars and leisure time and more food and stuff. You get extra problems. You need more people managing AI. So if you have a factory that's robotic, you'd think, well, that's fantastic. All the workers can get a UBI and be sent home, and it's like Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. If you remember in that movie, The Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, they get, at least in the last one with Johnny Depp, Charlie, all the Oompa Loompas and stuff get replaced by robots. And then the movie ends happily because Charlie's dad gets his job back and now he's fixing robots. Well, yeah, but I mean, what about the other 999 people in the factory? They all laid off. Now, economists say, well, they go to other chocolate factories and start working. But it doesn't happen that way. It shows that, what statistics show now is that AI just basically forces those guys into working harder for Uber or whatever's left in the gig economy. And so, for every Charlie's Chocolate Factory you make, it doesn't mean that now you've got leisure time. It means that now you've got robotics, you've got the electronics, a million more jobs in effect to support that supposedly automated factory. And economists say that's great, jobs for everybody. But they're not really. They're shitty jobs that are getting worse and worse, and the machines are doing more and more. So you're getting into this Byzantine top-heavy complexity. And everybody says, well, we're going to hit the technological singularity. Well, we're sure as nuts going to do that. It's called collapse. It's basically, it becomes so top-heavy that nothing fucking works. And that's where we're getting to now. If we've already got there, in fact. And we got there in 2008. And so what we've been seeing is the unraveling of tech society. But unfortunately, not being made for it, and it's not part of our narrative.
I have a comment. So with energy, peak oil and all that, there will probably come a time when it will be like Texas, when we'll have brownouts or rolling brownouts. Do you also envision that the internet will go down, or maybe we will just have spotty internet or rolling internet availability, which in a way, in my mind, would be good in the sense that we cannot be surveilled all the time. There will be periods of outage when we won't be tracked, and we won't be so addicted to our tech because the internet will not be available as 100% resource for us to use. I'm just wondering on what you think will happen with internet connectivity.
So, of course, the internet doesn't work when there's power outage, but people will go to more and more effort to stay connected. So the internet is quite resilient. For one thing, it's really for the military. It's like the highway system. It's given to civilian use just as kind of a backhanded favor, but its primary use is military. And so you mustn't forget that they're going to keep the internet going to the last because it's military strategic. And its primary use is not civilian, although all the civilians think it's all, to post caps. It's not. It's
Yes.
intelligence.
Yeah, thanks for that. I remember you did tell us that a while back, that it was for military purposes. Yeah.
Yeah, but there are a number of things where I think that where the internet will go. One of them is balkanization. So the old ideal of the hippies and Tim Berners-Lee and stuff, that we'll have a global internet and all these new kind of democratic systems, and that's already dead. I mean, the bamboo curtain and these all these private internets. The internet is showing too much ability to cause an insurrection. So you'll have these legal barriers and all these kind of balkanized internet zones. So the internet will fragment, and already has. You'll have the Chinese internet, and you'll have the Iranian and Russian, and each country will control the internet more and more. It becomes more and more important for countries to be able to switch it off, because after the Arab Spring, it played such a big part in the Arab Spring, and they couldn't switch the internet off. And so the Arab Spring really ran on social media. They've since stopped that. I mean, you saw how controlled it was in COVID, how they can how they have control of the information, and you know pretty well that you know, they can also you know, switch off if there was a massive insurrection, say in the States, they would switch the internet off very quickly. And then the other thing is that the experience of the internet will get more and more shitty. It'll basically become more and more like interactive TV. So by the time Elon Musk puts up things like Starlink, then you'll have more and more private internets. But those internets are not part of the universal internet. They will also have, you know, they will shape the traffic on that. They will control the content, and we're going back to 1998. So in 1997, 1998, people have this kind of lacuna where they forgot where the next big thing was. And the next big thing was Microsoft and IBM and all those big guys of the day. They were going to do interactive TV. The idea was you have all the fiber and everything, and your TV, you know, has all this stuff gushing at you, and they'd give you a back channel on your TV so you could interact with your TV. And basically, they would control it. You would have like Comcast or whatever your service provider was. They would control your entire experience. They would control all your shopping. It would be, you know, you would be entirely in a locked in to a network. And we're talking locked in, so you wouldn't be able to go to Amazon if you say on the Comcast network. You'd have to be on the Amazon network to buy stuff from Amazon. That stuff, and to see shows and stuff, you'd have to be on a particular network. There would be like network TV, and so yeah, for 20 years we got almost what the hippies wanted, but now they've got entirely, the internet experience is entirely it's entirely now interactive TV. If you look at YouTube and stuff, all the censorship there is just, they're trying to make it a PG channel for family viewing. And so, you know, it's basically, they just all will be seeking the same profit. So you'll have loads of choices of shit, basically 99 channels, 99 flavors of internet and stuff all on. and then people will increasingly, you know, have battery backup and generate and stuff, so that they won't have heating in their house, but they will have internet. So that it becomes, you know, just like people would go to excessive trouble to have radios and stuff in an emergency situation. The internet is the new radio network. So we can't get away from the internet.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and then 5G and all of those stuff, they just integrated more and more and more into our lives. You know that there's a French, this French cult. They were basically kind of deep green resistance types, and they started doing their own permaculture stuff. And the French police, they raided and arrested them all. And in court, they said the very first thing that tipped them off, that started their surveillance, was the guy stopped using cell phones. That was the trigger to where the state started monitoring them closely. So that was almost 10 years ago.
Oh boy.
So yeah, there's no escape from this. Basically, it's very hard now to exist without internet connection. I mean, just managing anything, just the bureaucracy of the state is run through the internet. A lot of taxes and stuff you need to do to go online, you know. So yeah, the internet it's one of the last things to go. Yeah, it's but the experience is going to get shitty. It's going to be the days of guys like me putting up videos and stuff can't last much longer, you know. I mean, they'll last, but I mean, like, very small audience. Like from my audience on YouTube, you know, some of those videos I did with McPherson and stuff, they got, you know, in the like 6,000 or 7,000 views. Now I get about 200 views because the algorithms, they don't even notify people that are subscribed and stuff. They just would. If you look at Kevin on, you know, Black Bear News and stuff, he's down to a few hundred. He used to have thousands of views, down to a few hundred, just because the algorithms are cutting it out. So they don't want a democratic internet. It's a very, very powerful tool, and broadcast media always was powerful, right from the beginning of print. If you go and look at the Gutenberg printing press, when the Gutenberg printing press started, there were thousands of printing presses, and it was like the internet. Everybody was suddenly publishing. There was a revolution, or literally revolutions based on. There are a lot of people say trace the the revolts and stuff that happened in Europe to the printing press. And certainly the Calvinist revolution, all of that came from Britain. So there was a time when everybody had a printing press and everybody was using. And then they shut them all down. They started licensing printing. They made it harder and harder to print, till eventually, to have a print newspaper, you would have to be somebody like Murdoch, and it all got consolidated. So the internet will go the same way. Yeah, it's life, life in the alien cortex. Yeah, that's the way they live.
Yeah, it's interesting. I was just thinking back over a few years that, I used to be able to just look down the list of recommended videos on YouTube every day and find something really interesting to look at. And now, like if I go to YouTube or something, I don't even waste my time looking down I don't scroll it at all, because I already know there's going to be nothing there. It doesn't matter how many channels you subscribe to, how many times you might listen to some other interesting things. They just don't recommend anything worthwhile. It's not there. It's, they just completely, they've emasculated the entire thing.
Yeah, that was always their plan. It's amazing, really, that the internet lasted for 20 years, but it's over now. Yeah, but yeah, I mean, we can still do stuff like this, right? You can still doing conference calls and stuff. So there is.
Oh yeah, but I mean,
counterculture.
everything is isolated. Like, as if you don't already know that it's there, you're never going to find it. It's remarkable how specific your search might have to be, and how persistent you would have to be to find something. And even then, you've got to be assuming that it's there to find in the first place. You can say, supposing somebody's got a particular take on things and that they've done videos, how would I search for that?
So one thing they will struggle to do is to manage things like conspiracy theories and countercultural movements. So if you have an ecosystem of like-minded people like us, that's very hard for them to control. So if you don't try and go for the big numbers, if you go for the big numbers, they'll try and quash you. But if you see, imagine something like the Falun Gong in China. You can get a mass movement, a mass countercultural movement, and they find it very hard to suppress it. And in fact, the more they suppress it, the more attractive it becomes. It's like the early Christians. Is if it's an underground cultural movement, it's attractive for that reason alone, because people that are disaffected with the status quo, and they are just going to grow in numbers, are looking for some alternative. And so there again, the left needs to catch up. The right wing are ahead of the game in terms of internet countercultural movements. And the left is not. They're still too full of ego. They still have their heads up their ass. And so things like XR are very authoritarian. And they don't have the feeling of a popular countercultural movement. They have a feeling of, a COINTELOP. So the left is not doing well on that. It's kind of cancel culture and all of these things. They're not really a countercultural movement. So they don't have an identity, and they don't have much of a philosophy. It's very thin philosophy. So I think there's a lot of scope for cults and countercultural movements. I think they're going to be lots. In fact, you would expect that as things fragment, secret societies, all of that stuff. So so again, coming full circle back to what we've lost and what we've gained. Although we've lost the Tim Berners-Lee free internet and the hippie ideal of a unified world, well, what we are gaining is the exciting Elizabethan world of undercurrents and secret societies. It's far more exciting than a unified world. It's I would much rather have the world of Klaus Schwab and the Great Reset being attacked by secret societies than I would have, a global kumbaya, we all friends together sorting out the planet. I think it's a lot more exciting and adventurous to to have a countercultural movement and a rebellion. Rebellions are really fun. If you want meaning to life, they really are fun. But you have to have a kind of a Tintin, sense of adventure. Tintin and the Great Collapse.
Yeah. Hugh, do you want to touch on the other topic of your position, or do you want to leave that because it's a bit late now? Do you want to do that next time?
How much longer do people want to go? It's like
it's 10 minutes off 2 hours, I think.
Oh shit. Yeah. Well, so maybe we should round it off. That's too long.
Yeah, maybe just leave it at that and try to talk about your situation next week. You want to do that, or
so yeah. Okay, just lay it out there so we know what to talk about next time.
Basically, Hugh and I were having some conversations, and well, I mean, for anyone who's watched his video, particularly go back and watch, what is it, number 32, I think, where you explained that you were employed for a while, and then you ended up living on your savings, and of course you've turned out an enormous body of work in terms of the videos and the book and other writings, as well as keeping the Reddit and Discord going. But the practicality of life is that Hugh is likely to need some employment to just to survive like everybody else, and we were just discussing what strategies or what might be available to I think basically I could probably speak for all of us in saying that we would like Hugh to be able to devote his time entirely to what he's doing at the moment, because of the inherent value in it. So it was basically to put the question out there if anyone's got suggestions or want to help in any way. This is probably a good time to be coming forward to say something or do something. We talked about the possibility of monetizing some of his videos, but more or less, I guess the conversation we've just been having is going to indicate that that's probably not going to be massively profitable turnout, I guess. But yeah, I think it's going to be worthwhile to bring this up every now and then to keep people reminded.
I do have to give some attention to monetizing a bit of what I'm doing, because if I want to carry on doing it, I've got to have a source of income. I'm not. I'm just living off fixed assets, and they're not going to last much longer. But I think what I'll do is I'll start putting videos and stuff behind a paywall on Patreon and stuff, and see how that goes. But what my dream has always been is I would like more people to get involved so that we could all make money out of the project. I didn't really ever see it as a project for making me money, but I would really like it if, I mean, I have dozens of ideas for things for people to do, but I would like it if we could all support ourselves out of, the org and stuff in particular. So, yeah, I think we should.
Well, the thing is,
talk about it.
maybe we're going to have to, because if it's not talked about here and it's not talked about on Reddit or Discord, nobody's knows about it. So we'll, maybe devote, every second, third, however many meetings entirely or mostly to that kind of thing, so that those ideas are getting discussed. Otherwise, if it's just a one-off thing or there's no particular forum for presenting it, it just doesn't go anywhere.
Yeah, I mean, if we are doing a movement, movements do run on cash. That's the reality of the world we live in. So even if you anti-money, you still need it to live in this society. But yeah, I would really like to explore the idea of us all, making money, because I've always thought you can do activism, do really personal development and make money and do infotainment for people all in one. I think it can be an ecosystem that generates money for us to live on, and I would like to expand that, see if anybody's interested. But potentially it would be really nice if we could all live through the collapse on a growing ecosystem of basically adaptation. So one of the ways of adapting is finding new sources of income. I can always just go back to being a wage slave, or at least I hope I can. Always thought I could, but I might be educated on that score. But what would really appeal to me, and I think it would be really exciting, is if we could all explore it together. I would really like it if we could have an ecosystem that's, we explore collapse, adaptation, and we use it as a vehicle to find ways where we can all live during collapse too. That would be really exciting, I think. So yeah, and
yeah. Well,
well,
I mean, this is where actually you sort of started that discussion in the book. Really, I guess it touched on this a little bit, and
yeah,
maybe
I did suggest that kind of thing in the arc, but I didn't flesh it out enough or pursue it enough. But yeah, since I think maybe that's in the next Sunday, we should start discussing it. But I would really like to know from people if they would really like to have an income stream from this, and I mean, to the point where you can actually survive off it. Not in great luxury, but in kind of like, Sam Mitchell type of luxury, basically 500 a month or something. If you can live on small change. But yeah, nobody. The way our society is structured, it's structured so that you can only live by suffering. And if you do what you enjoy, basically, there's considered no payment. So it's very, very hard to make a living off movies and writing and creative arts and stuff. But I think we could if we did it in the form of a game. It's always back to the thing that the Institute movie, where originally got the idea for the game, or at least crystallized it for me. And I always thought that it was an artwork, and I always thought you could have monetized that and keep it growing organically. And I thought that would be a really cool thing. But does anybody else see this vision or care?
Well, it's the how and what skills we can, or I personally can contribute. I mean, if there's a list of skills that I can apply for, kind of like to slot into a plan, yeah, I'd be willing to, to help out. But it's the not knowing what skills are needed. Um,
I think it's more the other way around. We should take the skill set that we've got, and because the Naga is so open-ended, you can
okay.
do anything. So it's more like come up with stuff you would like to do, and we'll find a way, work together to make a way that you can do it. You see what I mean? Think of
Yeah,
it that
yeah,
way
it's the other
around.
way around. Okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I'm liking the idea. Definitely, it's something we can grow. And I agree. We each have our own, well, whatever we'd like to do, like some skills. Yeah, we can definitely contribute. And it's good. It's kind of reminding me of mutual aid. It's kind of like the same concept where we're reaching out to each other. We're reaching out to community to survive or kind of thrive on our own apart from the system. Yeah.
Yeah, and hopefully this. I hate to use the word synergy, but hopefully there's some synergy. So like Divine Beast is doing artwork and stuff like that. So we could, I imagine you can start collaborating. So instead of just doing artwork that you try and sell as an individual, is you collaborate and we do like a graphic novel or something like that. And just seems to me that it would be kind of exciting thing to do. But anyway, the Gary's point was I do have to start thinking in terms of monetizing a bit of what I do. So it's just putting stuff behind paywalls and stuff in my next videos. And anyway, the next videos were gonna be on Christian bashing, so I might get booted off YouTube anyway for that. I might work better behind a paywall and Patreon or something. So,
Oh, have you considered Rockfin? That's where BlackBerry
yeah.
News is not transitioning, but they also have an alternate channel.
I
Rock.
signed up for it. But I didn't put any videos up there yet. Yeah, I think I got approved. You got to sign up and put a website and stuff, so they kind of
Yeah.
they do have to approve you. But I think they sent me an email saying I was approved, so I could yeah. I think Kevin's getting most of his traffic now from Rockfin, more traffic than YouTube. Yeah. So okay. Well, that's cool. Well, anything else? Anybody, or should we wrap it up there?
That's 2 hours, I think.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah,
Cool.
because that's a lot. You've covered a lot of ground. Yeah. All right. Well, thanks for that, Hugh. That was great. Thanks,
Yeah,
everyone.
thanks for bringing
Yeah.
that up. But
Yeah.
let's discuss more about the
Yeah,
nitty-gritty
maybe
of videos.
just set aside, or maybe what we did just now, the last part of the meeting, or the first part of it, or something every time to just sort of build up a picture, I guess, because I'm feeling fairly blank about it. But after a while, sort of might develop. Yeah. All right then. We call it a night or a morning,
Yeah.
wherever you are.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No,
Okay.
morning.
Thank you. All right. Bye then.
Okay.
Okay. Right.
All right.
All right,
See you
everyone.
later.
Bye.
See you.
See ya.
Thank
Bye.
you. Bye.